I can't move my legs. The REM pod screaming, the air just dropped 10 degrees and something just whispered my full name into my ear. I'm alone in the basement where Clifford Olson used to brag about his trophies. If I don't upload this, forget the evidence, forget me. Look, I've slept in some truly messed up places. Cemeteries, abandoned asylums, even those creepy clown motels that feel like a fever dream. But I have never, and I mean never, felt evil like this. Tonight I did something I swore I wouldn't do again. I locked myself inside the Coquitlam property, the very house where Canada's most hated serial killer, Clifford Olson, planned his unspeakable acts, partied with a chilling disregard for human life, and possibly, just possibly, buried secrets that refuse to stay hidden. What you're about to listen to isn't some polished documentary, it's the raw, unedited timeline of my night. Every battery drain, every disembodied voice, every single moment I questioned not just what was around me, but what was happening inside my own head. I came here looking for ghosts, for the echoes of tragedy. What I left fearing was something way older, way more insidious than any mere phantom.
Clifford Olson. Just hearing that name still makes parents across Vancouver flinch, doesn't it? It's a name that conjures a visceral fear, a chill that runs deeper than any urban legend. 11 kids, 11 young lives, aged 9 to 18, vanished in less than a year back in '81, leaving a trail of unimaginable grief and terror across British Columbia. And the man responsible? He cut deals with the cops, pocketed $100 grand cash for bodies payout, essentially selling the locations of his victims for money for his family. Can you even imagine? He died smiling in a prison hospital, a final, sickening act of defiance against the justice he'd so expertly evaded for so long. Locals here, they swear something lingered on this property. You hear stories. Real estate listings for this house, they keep disappearing off the market, sometimes within hours of being posted, as if the place itself is actively resisting new occupants. And the whispers. Neighbors talk about hearing kids' voices, faint but clear, echoing from the property at precisely 3:12 a.m. Why that specific time? Because that's the exact minute Olson's first victim was last seen alive. A macabre anniversary replayed night after night. I had to know. I had to know if trauma, that deep, soul-shattering kind of trauma, can truly stain a place, seep into its very foundations, the way blood soaks into floorboards, leaving an indelible mark no amount of cleaning can ever erase. Can a house remember the horrors it witnessed? And if so, what does it remember? The drive out here was eerie. Even in broad daylight, the air thickened as I got closer. The house itself sits quietly, almost deceptively normal from the outside. But the moment I stepped onto the property, it was like walking into a different atmosphere entirely. The sun was still high in the sky, yet the hallway inside felt like it was holding its breath, a palpable sense of anticipation, or maybe dread, hanging heavy in the air. My first order of business, as always, was a baseline sweep. I meticulously planted static cameras in every corner, ensuring I'd capture every inch of this place. Then, out came the EMF meter. I ran a baseline scan, 0.6 milligas. Perfectly normal, perfectly rational. Nothing to see here, right? Just a standard reading for a house that's been standing for decades. But then, as I was setting up, I noticed my dog tag hanging from its chain around my neck, swinging ever so slightly by itself. My rational brain immediately kicked in. Oh, it's just a draft, I told myself, trying to dismiss the prickle on my arms. Spoiler alert, there was no draft. Not a window open, not a fan running. The house was sealed tight. As 7:30 p.m. rolled around, a different kind of quiet settled in. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was that hollow, expectant silence, the kind you get just before the haunt. You know the feeling? It's when the world outside fades away and the house itself seems to click into an almost sentient state, waiting. I locked the front door from the inside, the heavy click echoing unnaturally loud. Then, almost ritualistically, I slid the key under the mat, a symbolic gesture, I guess. If something wants out, it won't be needing a key. It'll have to walk through me. And honestly, at that point, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to be standing in its way.
Nightfall here wasn't just a change in light. It was a shift in the very fabric of the house. The shadows deepened, not just from the fading sun, but from something else, something heavier. Every creak, every groan of the old house was amplified, each sound a potential precursor to something far worse. Then, at precisely 9:11 p.m., it happened. My audio recorder, which I'd set up in the living room, captured it clear as day. A kid's voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering, "Can't breathe." My own breath hitched in my throat. I wasn't breathing either. And just as the sound faded, the attic hatch, directly above me in the hallway, slammed shut with a sickening thud that rattled the entire house. Coincidence? My rational mind screamed yes, but my gut screamed something else entirely. I immediately grabbed my spirit box, frantically scanning the frequencies. And what do you think came through? The name Cliff. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. Then, a distinct, unmistakable, cash register ding. A coincidence? Maybe. But coming in this house, where a serial killer named Clifford made a cash for bodies deal, it felt like a sick, twisted, cosmic joke. My blood ran cold, literally. The temperature in the room plummeted to a bone-chilling 51 Fahrenheit in July. Goosebumps marched up my arms like an army of tiny, terrified soldiers. I stood there shivering, trying to regain some semblance of control. "If you've got a deal to make," I challenged, my voice barely a whisper, "speak now." The reply was instant, chilling, and utterly horrifying. A single wet laugh right behind me.
A laugh that felt too close, too real. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness, but there was no one there. Just the empty, echoing hallway and the lingering, suffocating sound of that laugh. By 11:30 p.m., the house felt like it was actively pushing me towards the basement. It was the heart of the horror, the place where Olson reportedly kept his trophies and where the deepest secrets of this house were buried. I took a deep breath, the air thick and stale, and slowly, deliberately opened the cellar door. The wood groaned in protest, a sound like a tortured scream. The first thing I noticed was the smell, a faint metallic tang beneath the mustiness, and then I saw it. The wood on the stairs, still stained. The previous owners, I'd heard, had tried everything. Bleach, sanding, even replacing entire planks. But the outline, that dark, disturbing stain kept bleeding through, a permanent scar on the wood, a visual reminder of something unspeakable. Halfway down the creaking steps, my heart was drumming so loud it drowned out the subtle hum of the REM pod I was carrying. And then, abruptly, the pod flatlined. Total silence. A suffocating, absolute silence that felt heavier than any noise. It lasted for only a second, but it stretched into an eternity. Then, in a cacophony of terror, every device I had with me, the EMF meter, the REM pod, the spirit box, screamed at once, a piercing electronic shriek that ripped through the silence. My flashlights, mounted on my camera and helmet, began to strobe erratically, flashing like lightning in the pitch-black abyss. My chest felt caved in, like an invisible weight was pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I tasted iron, a metallic tang of fear and adrenaline coating my tongue. Later, reviewing the audio, the true horror of that moment became clear. Amid the electronic chaos, a breathy, guttural voice, undeniably male, could be heard counting. 1, 2, 3, it whispered, each number a hammer blow to my sanity, until it reached 11. 11.
Olson kept count too, didn't he? 11 victims. It wasn't just a random count. It was a chilling, direct message, a perverse acknowledgement from whatever entity resided in that dark, stained basement. The line between investigation and psychological unraveling started to blur around 1:58 a.m. I was pacing the kitchen, a frantic, caged animal, trying desperately to stay rational, to cling to the scientific method that usually grounded me. This wasn't just cold spots and EVPs anymore. This was something far more insidious. My phone, lying on the counter, suddenly buzzed. I picked it up, intending to text my editor, just a quick check-in, heading home soon. But as I typed, the autocorrect feature, usually so helpful, went rogue. It autocorrected home to holes. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. A small, seemingly insignificant detail, but it felt like the house itself was messing with my head, worming its way into the digital world, twisting my intentions. Then the windows. They started to frost over, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Jagged patterns of ice blooming on the panes, despite the stagnant, heavy air in the house. I caught my reflection in the glass, pupils blown wide with terror, neck veins pulsing visibly beneath my skin. I'm not some wide-eyed believer who folds at the first sign of a cold spot. I hunt serial killer sites precisely because they test me, because they force me to confront the darkest aspects of humanity. But this was different. My thoughts, usually so clear and analytical, began to sound like someone else's voice, low and glib, a sickeningly familiar cadence. "Take the deal, take the money," it whispered inside my head. It was Olson's voice, the voice of the opportunist, the manipulator, echoing the very cash for bodies deal that made him infamous. I suddenly realized with a horrifying jolt that I was bargaining, not with a ghost, not with a demon, but with myself. That's the moment I truly understood. Evil isn't just a phantom in the corner, a monstrous entity with glowing eyes. Sometimes it's a contagion, a parasitic idea that latches onto your own mind, twisting your thoughts, making you question your very sanity until you're left bargaining with the darkest parts of your own reflection. The air grew heavy, thick with an almost suffocating dread as the clock ticked closer to 3:12 a.m., the exact anniversary minute of Olson's first victim being last seen alive. I stood in the living room, camera clutched tight, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then, with a deafening pop, every single light bulb in the house blew out simultaneously. I was plunged into absolute, suffocating pitch black. The only light was the faint, eerie red glow of the exit sign above the front door, a cruel beacon of a way out that felt miles away.
Suddenly, something tugged my jacket. Hard enough to spin me completely around, sending my head reeling. I stumbled, flashlight beam wildly cutting through the darkness, trying to find my footing. I swung the camera wildly toward the sound I heard next. Footsteps, child-sized, bare, slapping wetly against the concrete floor of the hallway, moving with an unnerving, deliberate pace. Then, just as suddenly, silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. My voice, barely a whisper, cracked through the darkness. "Show your face," I demanded, trying to sound brave, trying to sound in control, but my voice trembled. The dark answered, not with a vision, not with a physical manifestation, but with my own voice, my own words played back. Show your face. But it wasn't my voice. It was warped, deeper, laced with a smug, mocking cadence that sent shivers down my spine. It was Olson's courtroom cadence, the voice of a man who reveled in his own depravity, mocking me with my own fear. That was it. The last shred of my composure shattered. I bolted. I ran for the stairs, scrambling upwards, driven by pure primal terror. The front door, the one I had unlocked hours earlier, was suddenly slammed shut, clipping my elbow with a sickening crack as I tried to burst through. For 30 agonizing seconds, I screamed. I screamed at that locked door, at the unseen entity that had trapped me, my voice raw and hoarse. When it finally, miraculously gave way, I tumbled into the dawn-gray hallway, gasping for air, sobbing like a kid myself, the cold morning air, a brutal, welcome shock against my tear-streaked face. Sunrise never felt so surgical, so cleansing. Each ray of light felt like it was cutting through the lingering darkness, but it couldn't erase the night. I sat on the curb outside, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the residual terror that clung to me like a shroud.
My hands, still shaking, painstakingly reviewed the footage. The objective evidence, the undeniable proof was there, staring back at me. 11 distinct shadow figures, captured moving across the basement floor. 2 clear EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, of children's voices reciting their ages at death. And then the thermal camera footage from the basement. A distinct, unmistakable hotspot shaped precisely like a dollar sign, radiating heat from the very spot where the counting had occurred. My skeptic side, the logical, scientific part of my brain that always demands tidy, rational answers, tried to explain it away. But my shaking hands, the raw terror still etched on my face, they didn't care for tidy answers. They knew what they had experienced. I left that house with one certainty, a profound, chilling realization. Whatever's in that house, whatever malevolent force resides there, it feeds on bargaining. It thrives on the same transactional cruelty that allowed Clifford Olson to sell his victims' locations for cash, to profit from unspeakable suffering. This house, this entity, it wants a deal, and I had no intention of making one. Okay, so you've seen what went down. Now I need to know what you think. If you believe I should go back to that house, maybe with a team, with better defenses, type back in the comments below. And if you've ever felt something you couldn't explain, something truly chilling in a place with an ugly past, share the location. No judgment here. I read every single story, and your experience might just become our next episode. Evil isn't always a phantom in the corner, a monstrous figure lurking in the shadows. Sometimes it's a deal whispered in your own voice at 3 a.m., a contagion that twists your mind.
I survived the night, physically at least. But the footage, the raw, unedited evidence I captured, it rattles me more than any poltergeist ever could. I'm uploading every second of it, unedited, because hiding edits feels like hiding evidence, and I refuse to do that. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when we return to places like this, if we return with better defenses, stronger resolve, or if we return at all. Stay safe out there. Keep questioning everything, and remember, some doors, once opened, won't close the same way again. Clifford Robert Olson Jr., January 1st, 1940, September 30th, 2011, is one of Canada's most notorious serial killers, responsible for the murders of 11 children and teenagers in British Columbia between 1980 and 1981. His crimes, the subsequent legal proceedings, and the ethical controversy surrounding his case have left a lasting mark on Canadian criminal history and public consciousness. One of the most controversial aspects of the case was the cash for bodies deal. Olson agreed to reveal the locations of the victims' bodies in exchange for $10,000 per body, totaling $110,000, to be paid to his wife and son. Authorities, desperate to bring closure to grieving families, agreed to the arrangement, sparking national outrage and debate over the ethics of compensating a serial killer. The cash for bodies deal remains one of the most contentious decisions in Canadian criminal justice, raising questions about the price of closure and the limits of negotiation with perpetrators.